Yeah, film. Yeah, films. We watched some films. So let's talk about those films.
And I'll tell you about this time because I'm gonna open it up for me to talk now.
Do it.
Cool. So as I said a few times, we're talking about False Positive, which is from 2021. It is brand new, and so we threw it up into our schedule immediately and then watched it. We have actually watched quite a few pregnancy movies for this show, and this is not one we like. So this is directed by John Lee, and the synopsis is, as if getting pregnant weren't complicated enough, Lucy sets out to uncover the unsettling truth about her fertility doctor. Let's dive in. Let's get into this. I do want to say that I didn't loathe this movie, like we were saying. I didn't love it. I don't think I want to punch anybody who made it. But I don't also super enjoy that I watched it. But it's also what was I expecting from a Hulu horror movie? You know, 1 out of the 10 that I've seen being good, and that was Tragedy Girls. So anyway, John Lee's False Positive is a slow anticlimactic thriller dressed up as several other movies with none of their charm. It tries to be Stepford Wives. It tries to be Rosemary's Baby, tries to be anything that's remotely interesting. And it was marketed to feel as if it were a new millennial vision for Rosemary's Baby, with the modern pregnancy horrors that feature IVF treatments. Which is alluring, and that's why I picked it. Because I was that sounds interesting. Also, we appreciate Rosemary's Baby. We have also already covered a film that has Rosemary's Baby-esque themes in it and did a really good job. The story follows a couple, Lucy, who's played by Illana Glazer from Broad City. I do not recognize her in this without her curls. And honestly, that might be a part of why I felt like I didn't trust the character Lucy, too. I was thinking about that earlier. Because I just was like, who is this? I was like, why? Why are you do? It just, everything about her felt really fake in that she was trying to be a person that people wanted her to be. And that made me uncomfortable in the way that, Kat often feels uncomfortable but with inauthenticity. And then her husband, Lucy's husband, Adrian, is played by Justin Theroux from The Leftovers. That's what I know him from, and I enjoyed him in that. And they navigate the world of IVF treatment after years of failed attempts at getting pregnant in the more traditional ways. It False Positive wants you to fear pregnancy, but not for any of the appropriate reasons. I think comparing this film to Rosemary's Baby is a disservice to not only that film, but the horror genre itself. Because Rosemary's Baby was as much a scary film about Satan and cults as it was about the lack of bodily autonomy for women in our medical systems. It was a social horror film whose commentary blends the genre with its message quite flawlessly. False Positive wants you to think it's a smart film about women's empowerment while also reaffirming the same narratives that bind them. So instead of actually doing all the work that Rosemary's Baby's doing, it's just riding on the coattails of something as great as Rosemary's Baby and not doing any of the work. It's get it, yeah,
you're not wrong.
Preach. As I said, we've covered horror films about pregnancy previously, or horror movies in which there were pregnant people. And I think the strength of those others, so we covered Good Manners and Lyle recently, was that they didn't lean into the pregnancy is terrifying premise. And this is to say that pregnancy can be terrifying and is risky, and there's no end to what horror media could actually do with the real horrors of creating and birthing a human being. People have died giving birth or have had their bodies drastically altered by the process. So there's so much to be said about the horrifying ways in which women's bodies are controlled, manipulated, and stolen by our patriarchal society. And we could discuss abortion, genetic manipulation, rape, postpartum depression. The list goes on. There's innumerable things that can be said about the horrors around pregnancy. And I feel like False Positive tees up opportunities to explore some of these themes, but actually never dives into them. And it really leaves you confused and dissatisfied. And even at some points angry, because you wanted, even if you don't know that your media analysis glasses on, odds are you might feel cheated by this plot, because it's setting up moments where you think something's going to happen and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
There's one line in particular that's said in the beginning of this film that immediately rubbed me the wrong way and more or less kind of set me up to not enjoy this film. And it's like one of the first lines we ever hear Lucy say. And it's with Lucy and Adrian, and they're discussing the decision to do the treatments after years of trying. And Lucy is feeling really sad about her supposed failure as a woman for not being able to do this one thing, which is totally valid. Right. And for a lot of people who have been trying and attempting to get pregnant for years with no luck, it could really wear you down, and it could do a number on your emotional health. Like, totally understandable that she was vulnerable and felt this way. But she says something along the lines of, I'm not able to do the one thing women are supposed to do, which I was like, wow, rude. Like, first of all, that's incredibly false. Women could do many things. All things. And not all women can have children or want to. And that doesn't make them any less of a woman. And that's also not even counting the fact that trans men can have children. Like, what are we doing here? Like, like that one line, I was like, it's so rude. And it wouldn't be as bad, just in that it is an inward kind of reflection and a sad remark towards herself, that Lucy is like, I feel like a failure, which is totally understandable that you feel that way and that you should feel comfortable to say that in that moment. But never is there a time, like, her husband doesn't push back and there's no revelation in the end that is not the case. It's never said, like, it's okay that you can't, or it's okay that, like, or just saying, like, you're wrong. Not, like, we never see another woman who isn't doing this traditional thing of having children or struggling to have children. Like, her friends are dismissed. Like, they're too, like, wild and party crazy. They're nothing but a sentence and are supposedly her best friends that he doesn't like because they're non-traditional women, like, quote unquote, not having children or not ready to have children.
They're young.
I
think it also just ignores the statistical evidence that men more often than not, like, society views it as the woman's fault for not being able to have kids, when statistically it usually has to do with the sperm of the man, and they just don't check that as often because all the pressure and, like, failure and thoughts are put onto the woman, which is just like
I mean, all right, looking at you, King Henry the 8th. Don't kill women because they didn't have the babies, because it seems like it might be your fault, bud. And even still, like, they're, like, just kind of off on the side is, like, there's a moment where they're like, you're fine and we can do this. And she's like, we went to so many other doctors, and it's just, like, blown over. Like, it's not like you just couldn't. Like, it was just like, oh, you just had this one little blip that was wrong. The other doctors didn't see, but I'm going to fix you. And when we get to the end, which I will, when we enter spoiler town, I'll let everyone know, that reveal does not answer why she was not able to have children this whole time. Unless you're pointing again at the husband. If you're like, clearly it wasn't her fault. If this happened so quickly. Anyway, I think Lucy and every other character in this film have a very specific vision for women and what they're supposed to be. And I think the aggravating thing about this film is that itself isn't the commentary being made. Like, that's not the problem in this film, is that there's that specific view of women. It's just, that's just how it is. In an article I found on Vulture called Hulu's False Positive Isn't Horror, But It Will Freak You Out by Helen Shaw, they say, yet at various points in the movie, some seemingly feminist guy, a boss, a husband, a doctor, will let his pretense slip. Which one will be the monster? The movie hints that in some way, they all are. And I think even the women in this film were anti-feminist, and they dismiss Lucy's concerns as mommy brain or working to uphold the patriarchal white supremacist and eugenic ideological beliefs held by Dr. John.
Yeah.
I would even go further in saying that Lucy, too, is a monster. Because for all their performative feminism, so the husband who gives Lucy the illusion of control, the doctor who acknowledges the strength of women but diminishes their worth by insinuating they exist to produce more men, and the boss who values her female input but uses her pregnancy to garner sympathy while continuing to have her place their lunch orders. Lucy isn't any better than them. I just didn't trust or like Lucy throughout the entirety of this film any more than the men. Like I said, she came off as fake, and just as Stepford Wivesy as the pink outfitted nurses at Dr. John's. She didn't see the injustice of how she was treated as being a bigger issue within the patriarchy. Like, she wasn't looking at this like all women, like, women have to suffer this way, or like this is a foundational problem and we need to make a change. She wasn't having any kind of awakening like that. It was just that she was upset that it was happening to her. And why her when she's the one who's been doing all the things right? She's the one who's not speaking up when she's not supposed to. She's, wearing the clothes she's supposed to wear. She listens to the husband. She, performs the womanly duties that she thinks she's supposed to. So why not her? Why is she suffering? Right. And it's not to say like, again, that's not the commentary. That's just expected of her. And I feel like this film is attempting to be many things and accomplishing not a single thing. Kate Erbland on IndieWire in their article, False Positive Review, Illana Glazer's pregnancy thriller isn't a bad Rosemary's Baby riff, it's worse. Starts their piece out with some hurtful truths that I was like, yes, come for this person's career, it's fine. John Lee's aimless feature isn't dark enough to be scary, funny enough to be a comedy, or smart enough to say anything about the main topic it seems to want to tackle. Whew.
Yeah.
True. This film is trying so hard, and it tells more than it shows, and in the end, there's nothing to learn. And I left the movie questioning like what I was supposed to leave with, and feeling really aggravated that there was nothing to show for what I just watched. There is this fun line towards the end when midwife Grace says, "I'm not your magical negress," after hearing Lucy recall that her office had been more tribal or traditionally African, because Lucy had essentially fantasized an entire persona for Grace to fulfill this role of the magical negress. So it was like, you're going to help the white character do this thing. Which is awful, right? And I enjoyed that line because I was like, okay, girl, get it. But we had not enough of Grace for that to feel valid or like more than, again, performative. And this part was like surprisingly funny, surprising in that so much of this film was deadpan and lifeless, that little line was like a zap of like any activity. But it read to me the way that the rest of the film reads and what the characters feel. And to me, it felt as if John is trying to say like, look, see, I get it. Men are trash. White people be like that sometimes. Yeah. Like, I'm hip. I'm in. And I was like, I was like, this is nothing. What you said is nothing. Like, you just made a joke about your own thing. Like, it's not cool. Like, pick a thing. Pick a lane to be in. And then make it about that. And during a perhaps hallucinated, because I'm actually not entirely sure it was real, advertisement video for Grace's midwife service, Grace explains how women have been giving birth since the dawn of time. And only now, with men in charge of the medical field, have they felt so vulnerable. So now it's like, oh, we have to be delicate with women, we have to do all these things, put it in the care of men and they will protect you, and Grace is pretty much like, ladies been doing this for each other like for forever, and then all of a sudden you're here. And she's not wrong, and it was a part of the film at that time that I appreciated, but that message wasn't ingrained in the film, but rather just a passing thought. Again, similar to the like, look, see, men suck, right? You shouldn't trust men in the medical industry. And in the end, despite using Grace's natural services, Lucy still ends up at the hospital. And it's like, why? What does that mean for all that talk about not needing men and their medical knowledge to only end up with him back between her legs?
Yeah.
Lee is trying so hard to say how much he is an ally that he misses out on actually being one. And now I want to enter into spoiler town. So I would say, watch it before if you want to, but it's fine. You could also just listen to this and know why you don't have to. Because it's honestly, most of it is just, she keeps ending up back into the hospital getting tests for whatever reason. And it's just vignettes of her life.
No other doctor, like this doctor.
Yeah, just always in this one room. Like, that's all it is. And sometimes I don't know what genre it is, really, because it's always something. It's always something new. I don't know. It's weird. So let's enter spoiler town, and I'll tell you. The end reveal gave me the same feeling that the documentary film Catfish did. Not a lot of people watch Catfish, but they probably watched the show that's on MTV, which came after the documentary. But in Catfish, it's revealed, surprise, that the woman he had been speaking to was not who she said she was. Yeah. That he had been catfished. And it was a twist that would have been maybe earth-shaking during the earlier years of the internet, but in 2010, it was lackluster and uninteresting. We had already lived so long with our lives online. Like, I grew up knowing about internet stranger danger and that people lie on the internet. That's not a reveal. So to see that the big reveal of a documentary that was advertised to be bizarre and completely unpredictable mystery by IndieWire was very mundane and incredibly predictable. Yeah. Its name was Catfish. Like, honestly, it was like, we knew what the word catfish was. It wasn't a surprise. So if you came out like 5 years earlier, 10 years earlier, people would have been like, what? Oh my God, now there's a word for it. This film was just like that. Because in the final moments, it's revealed that Dr. John has been inseminating women with his own sperm. And it was like, we kind of already knew that he was doing that.
I called that, like, I think within the first 20 minutes. I don't know if you remember. I was like, that's him. He said, you're like, clones.
Yeah.
And then I was like, clones. He is 100% inseminating these women with his own sperm. I don't know if that's actually true, but that is my theory. And then the rest of the movie happened and we were like, yeah. No, we knew
he was never trustworthy.
That he was a gross person. Like, what?
Yeah. What did he was even saying? Yeah. He does say clone. Everything. He's never trustworthy. It's always kind of gross. It wasn't a surprise. And the thing about it is that this is a real thing that has happened to women, and it is horrific. Kat is going to discuss it in her section, and it is why, where we had a hard time getting pumped for this episode, because it is very real. It's one of those real horrors that is just mind-boggling that it exists, and that anyone has the audacity or understanding of themselves to do such a thing that's as monstrous as this. And so in this end, right, like, Dr. John is as gross as he's ever been. He is revealed to essentially be a white supremacist who believes it's his destiny to populate the world with his perfect seed, right? Like, he thinks he is the best of men, and it is his job. And all the women who work for him believe that. And at one point, Lucy in this moment says, "You raped me. You raped me." And he, like, brushes it off, but she says it with, like, no drive and almost like it's a question. And to me, it felt like as if John Lee were afraid to make that statement fact. Because in the end, she is right. Yes. And that was the real horror story, right? Like, he murdered her daughter and lied to her, keeping her sons. And he did, in fact, rape her. But it's a question and it's blown off. Like, we've covered population control in the past. So if you do want to hear more on this incredibly gross decision to keep males to carry on the family name, you can check out that episode and also hear about other horrifying ways the government has controlled women's bodies. You can check that out. But I think it was worse for me that her reaction was so dulled and muted, and it had no triumphancy. Like, even in the end when she's, like, exacting revenge, it was like, for what? What is she actually feeling in this moment? No one knows, because she doesn't know. Because she doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah. That was the moment where it was very evident that it was written by a man.
Yes. Yeah, that one line, I was like, that is true, but she's not saying it like it's true. She's saying it like it's a suggestion, and she doesn't know if she's allowed.
Yeah.
And so it's like playing it safe, but still trying to be radical, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the worst parts in the end is that she hallucinates releasing the boys from her several stories apartment building window, which was like always without a screen. I thought that would stress me out. It was always shown without a screen, and I was like, no one should do that.
Yeah.
I've seen, whatever. But I felt that was revolting. And because to me, it's like those boys had nothing to do with what happened to her, right? Like, they are innocent. And had this scene not happened in the final 10 minutes, and we were allowed to, like, unpack, we could have actually had real conversations about the trauma of giving birth to a child out of rape. But like everything else in this film, we are offered up this thin layer of horrors around pregnancy, but never actually allowed to talk about it. It's almost as if John Lee doesn't actually want us to think about the issues he poses, but instead wants us to think that he thinks about them. And so here's a tip. Don't use women's bodies and issues as a button for horror without actually exploring and respecting those realities and taking the time to give them the attention that they deserve. Because that's it. You're trying to say all these things and you don't know any of it. And that's honestly the worst part of this film. And if you want a modern day Rosemary's Baby twist and turns film that will stress you out but also empower you, you should watch Lyle, which we covered in our queer horror series, and we're absolutely delighted. And it is short. It's only an hour long. It's super quick. And you can also check out Good Manners, which we also covered then, and it features pregnancy and werewolves. So do that instead. Don't watch this film. We watched it, so you don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, while we're in Spoiler Town, for a different show, Handmaid's Tale, it made me think Lucy was very reminiscent of, after you had said that Lucy's reminiscent of I forget what the main evil dude's name is, the commander, his wife.
Fred. His name's Fred because her name is Of Fred.
Of Fred, yes.
So Fred.
The wife in that scenario, who basically is upholding the patriarchy with the hopes of being able to control it. And then when it damages her, her view is not, oh no, this is happening to women. It is, oh no, this is happening to me.
Yeah, how could it happen to me?
Yeah. And still just very much feels ownership over this child that is like not in any way hers is, and like only wants this system to benefit her. And it kind of just goes back to the whole intersectionality of feminism and the role white women play and the damage that they do in the hopes that they'll get to actively benefit from the system instead of these men.
Dismantling it, yeah.
Yeah. So this film, man, okay.